Business Connections Live, the UK's leading online business channel. This is Business Connections Live with Steve Hyland.
Hello and welcome to Business Connections Live, the program for entrepreneurs, SMEs and business owners. Now, on today's show, how to be more effective in sales. You know, the thing about sales is it is the cornerstone of any business. Our success, if you're a small business owner or even a large business owner, depends on it. My guest on today's show is Antonio Falco. He is the sales director. So who is Antonio Falco and how can we increase sales in a competitive market?
As you said, I'm a business consultant. I specialise in sales and business development, and I work with a variety of businesses, have done for the past, 17 years now since I got out of corporate sales. And it's a lot of fun, it's a lot of hard work, but sales is so critical to any business. You know, I've said this in a number of different talks that I've done, and you've heard me do a number of talks. It's the lifeblood of the business, and without it, you have no business.
Indeed. Do you think the landscape when it comes to sales has changed over that last 20 years? If we look back, was sales conducted in a different way to the way it is conducted today?
That's a very good question. I think what's changed is the different avenues there are now, as I call them, loud hailers, to get your message out there. So your initial marketing before you actually get into that sales scenario with a potential customer. That's changed. I mean, in my day, there used to be some sort of database, yellow pages and a telephone. Now you've got a variety of different, as I've said, loud hailers that allow you to get your message out initially to potential customers. So some people like Twitter, some people like Facebook, some people like LinkedIn. There's just a variety of ways of getting your initial message out there. But fundamentally, when you're in front of a potential customer, I don't think that the skills that you needed 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago have changed in terms of the ability to understand what you're doing there. And as I've said on many occasions, and you've heard me say this before, sales is about the exchange of your product or service for their money. And it's how you make that exchange. And that's why I keep saying sales is both a science and an art. And so that's, I don't think, fundamentally changed. You still need to understand how to make that exchange.
Do you think a lot of today's salespeople are going out there and they are unprepared, not only for the process of conducting sales, but also that they're unprepared for the knockbacks that they're going to get? They sometimes feel, and we live in this world where everything happens very, very quickly. But do you feel when people go out there, they don't realise just how much knockbacks they're going to get when they are doing sales?
I think that's probably a very fair comment. I think that salespeople are probably unprepared. In my day, Steve, I learnt with a couple of very good companies, some in a classroom format, mainly out on the road. I had some fantastic teachers. I'm not sure that happens anymore. I think that a lot of companies are still in the mode of thinking that provided that somebody can, inverted commas, talk the talk, or have the gift of the gab. And by the way, Steve, for the past 25 years, I've not discovered what the gab is, by the way, that they are the skills required to be a salesperson. They're not. Selling is an art and a science. And what salespeople need to understand is you need to take it as seriously as any other profession. There's hundreds of sales books. I work with companies that insisted that we read some of them, as well as being taught on the job. That doesn't, I think, happen as much as it perhaps should do. Consequently, you know, salespeople maybe get the wrong reputation. They go out unprepared. They don't know what they're doing in front of people. They don't know how to handle a sales meeting. They don't understand the structure. They don't understand what questions to ask. That actually you should ask any questions. And that's why my new book, Stop Pitching and Start Selling, it should be a revelation to a number of people.
Well, we're going to talk about that a little bit later on. When it comes to actually putting that together and looking at those initial skills that you need, do you think a lot of people are actually going out there and nothing more than order collectors?
I think there are certain situations where people are working for companies where that's exactly what it is. You know, all the marketing and branding's been done for them, and they are essentially collecting orders. But for the majority of companies, smaller business, medium-sized businesses, where they need salespeople to actually, from the very start, and I remember reading just last year on a website that, an American website, interestingly, that a salesperson's value is their ability to create something from nothing. So you have nothing more than the product or service that you have to offer. Now, who on earth are you going to try and sell that to? How are you going to find that potential customer? And when you find them, what on earth do you do with them when you begin to engage with them? So the skills of calling people, understanding why you're making that call, making an appointment, sitting in front of them, and understanding the process of getting from Steve, very nice to meet you, to thank you for your order. They're skills that I think we need to understand need to be kept alive.
Well, we'll be talking about the key skills that a salesman needs to have in a few moments' time. It's interesting, you touched on the fact that you read an article that was written in America just a moment or so ago. Do you think the Americans have a different approach when it comes to the professionalism of a salesperson than we have here in the UK? You go into a supermarket or into a store, everybody is anything but a salesman. They are sales advisors, sales assistants, sales representatives. Nobody wants to be a salesman. Yet in America, it is seen as being
A profession.
Do you think we get that wrong?
For sure. I think that we need to stop worrying about the fact that we are salespeople. It's okay to be a salesperson. Actually, if you do it right, it's a fantastic job. Actually, if you do it right, you're a great value to your company. You're a great value to the industry. America has always taken a view that selling is a profession, as you've said. It is a serious job. It isn't something you fall into by accident, as many salespeople do. You know, it's almost like the last resort. I can't do X, I can't do Y, I'll try and do selling.
We do hear that a lot, don't we? That salesmen do end up falling into it, don't they?
Yeah. So I think America's view has always been, has been for a number of decades, that it is a profession. It's something you take seriously. It's something that requires engagement by you as the salesperson. It does require you to study the art, not just wing your way through it. You can only do that properly when you know it. It's a bit like watching a sport, snooker. You know, you watch the art of billiard playing or snooker and you think, wow, that was easy, I could have done that. What they don't show you is the hours and years of practice beforehand, before they get to that.
This is the overnight success that took 20 years.
There you go.
It's exactly that,
absolutely.
isn't it?
It's the Dali school of art. You know, I remember he did an interview a number of years ago. You can probably find it on the web, where the interviewer said to him, "Well, could you draw me something now?" And he said, "Well, give me a piece of paper and a pen." And he squiggled 3 or 4 lines. And the interviewer said to him, "Well, what's that worth?" And he gave him some horrendous figure. And the interviewer said, "Well, how on earth is that worth that sort of money? It took you 30 seconds to do it." He said, "No, it took me 25 years to do it."
Yes.
And that's the skill. So America takes selling as a profession. Are they as good at it as we are? Well, that's debatable. We're still very good at it here. We just need to take it seriously.
So we are good at it, which is the main thing. If you had to paint a broad brush, so not the detail, but a broad brush on the next question, what do you think the biggest mistake is that we make when we go out there?
Several.
All right, well, just give us a bit of a summary.
Being unprepared, not really knowing your product or service, because without knowing that, you don't know what to ask. You don't know what it is you need to find out that allows you to then show somebody a solution. Because what is selling? Selling is the art of finding out what the problem is and then showing them a solution. So it's the unpreparedness, it's the inability to take the role of selling as a serious job.
And what do you think the thing is that we most of us don't do? If we watch no more of the programme, what is the one thing that most salesmen don't do particularly well? Is it that final bit where they go, look, do you want this or don't you? Give us the order. Do they not go for the close?
That's one. That is one key element of it. Do you know what? I remember, Steve, being at a networking function years and years ago, and I got a question asked. It was around a round table discussion, and somebody asked me a question. He said to me, "Look, I've been seeing a particular customer now for the past 6 months. He loves everything I do, loves the solution I presented, but he never gives me the order. I said to him, look, do this. Give him a call, set up a meeting, and then when you get in front of him, this is exactly what I want you to say. And that is this. Steve, we've been talking now for 6 months. You like me, you like my product. Can I please have your order? Now, the anticipation was that the following month, when we all got back together, everybody was desperate to know what had happened. And he said to me, no, I did exactly what you told me. And the guy looked at me for a second, which of course, in that situation is a lifetime. And he said to me, you know what, I guess I have been messing you about. Here's the order. So yes, you have to ask at the end of the day for the order. And you know, you can be as sophisticated as you like in the sales process. And the really clever salespeople make it look easy. But at the end of the day, then you still have to say, can we have your order? And there's 2 reasons for asking that, or 3 reasons. 1, because you can identify whether or not you're wasting your time and theirs. And a very important rule in sales is this. What salespeople need to appreciate, and if you're running a business, you are that salesperson as well, is the equal value of the only 2 answers that somebody can possibly give you. And that is yes or no. If the answer is yes, fantastic, you got the order, take it, thank you, out the door. If the answer is no, Steve, great, stop wasting your time and theirs and get out and find somebody else. Both those answers, Steve, have equal value. And that's something that salespeople just don't understand. You're never going to make all the sales. You're only going to make the ones that you intelligently find and understand. So that's one thing. And the other thing I would say is that you have to have the tenacity to keep going. They keep saying sales and numbers game, and to an extent it is. You know what, Steve, I keep saying, if you give a dog a note, he'll actually make a sale. The trouble is, he might have to see 1 million people before he makes the sale. So the difference between us and a dog is that we can speak, and all we're doing is the better we get at taking our profession of selling seriously, the better we understand the process, the better we understand what it is we're trying to solve. And of course, as I've said, selling is solving a problem, showing a solution. The better we get at doing that, what we're doing is increasing our odds of making the sale.
Antonio Falco, he is the sales director. More from Antonio very shortly here on this week's edition of Business Connections Live. Now, last week's show, we had Deborah Hume. She joined me in the studio and we looked at mindset and engagement and how it affects organisational performance. It was a terrific show as always, and some really good advice there, particularly in the aspects of neuroscience and how to be better when it comes to leadership as well. So let's go back a week and get the highlights from the last show with Deborah Hume on this week's edition of Business Connections Live. Now, on today's show, we're going to be discussing employee engagement and the impact on employee motivation. And joining me in the studio is Deborah Hume, founder of Minerva Engagement.
Also, within organisations, we tend to communicate and we tend to engage very much on a rational level. So we are very much driven by strategy and process and facts and figures, but we forget that as human beings we're very emotional, and when we're receiving information we receive it first and foremost, even though we may receive it unconsciously, we receive it first and foremost on an emotional level. I think there's a number of things actually. If you look at what gets in the way of change particularly, or if you look at what gets in the way of me being able to engage with something that you're saying, there's a number of different factors. One is attitude and beliefs. So we have very deep-seated attitudes and beliefs, and they take a lot of time to shift and to move. So therefore, if you're asking me to change something that's fundamentally going to alter the way I think about something or I do something, you have to meet me on in my belief system. You have to move my belief system. I think a lot of leaders, to be fair, these days are trying very, very hard to engage their teams and engage their wider organisations on more of a knowledge-based approach and more of a sharing of ideas. So the command and control is still there. I think a lot are trying to move away from it. It doesn't work. I mean, it used to work maybe when we were less developed and less evolved, and when we didn't have the thinking capability and we didn't have the knowledge working environment that we've got now, but it doesn't work anymore.
even organisations that are going through a relatively stable period are still experiencing change. Thanks to many different factors, technology for one, for example, we are having to adapt daily to internal and external pressures. So organisations are having to change continuously. But if you look at organisations as being made up of many, many different individuals who are linked into many, many different teams, then actually you can think about it and you can work in a different way. It's broader than communication, I think. It's more about relationships and connections now. And people who are working in the type of organisations that we have today need to be expert at building relationships, managing networks, and creating connections. So within organisations, we will have a whole load of written rules that we will expect people to follow. Then we get massively surprised if they don't follow them. When we're under stress and we're in that fear state, the thinking aspect of our brain reduces to really considerably. It reduces to practically nothing, which basically means our ability to think stops, and we start to run on our emotional responses and our emotional reaction. The person who is more aware of their own state and where they are and how they're responding to situations, forget the person who's sending the message for a minute, but the person who's receiving it, they can actually manage themselves, as I said earlier, in a much more mindful way. I think be really clear with your employees on the psychological contract, if you like, that they're engaging into when they join the organisation and when they stay with the organisation. And that's around the purpose of the organisation, the vision of the organisation, the values of the organisation, the things that determine culture and behaviour and the reason somebody's going to invest their time to be there. And we tend to do that very heavily. We talk about that very heavily at the recruitment stage, and then it can be somewhat different when they join the organisation. And I think maintaining that and that level of consistency right through the employee life cycle is very hard to do. Deborah Hume, I'm from Minerva Engagement, and we specialise in employee engagement, internal communication and culture change. And I think the main takeaway from today is that employee engagement is very much around building connections and building relationship. It's a long, ongoing process, but it is something that makes a huge difference to sustainability in business, and it requires a different way of thinking and a different way of being than perhaps what we've dealt with before.
Deborah Hume on our last edition of Business Connections Live, where we were looking at mindset and engagement and how it affects organisational performance. Also featured on that particular programme, we had Dr. Linda Shaw as well, so a lot there about neuroscience. And if you're thinking to yourself, I'd like to have a programme like this one for my organisation, maybe you have a weekly or monthly newsletter, or you're looking for a way to effectively communicate with your staff, well, why don't you get in touch with us here at Business Connections Live? It's that easy to do. All you got to do is drop us an email to studio@businessconnectionslive.com, or you can pick the phone up and give myself, Steve Highland, or Linda Bazant a call on 01784 256 777. And we'll talk you through the process that you need to find out when it comes to having a program just like this one. Incidentally, you can follow our stream of consciousness as well on Twitter at BCL Business TV. Watch the weekly show live on our Facebook page. But honestly, the best place to go is to go to our main website at businessconnectionslive.com, where you'll find over 350 hours of great business advice. So go there, find out more about how we can help your business grow and be more successful. Now, my guest on today's show is Antonio Falco. He is the sales director, and we're looking at how we can increase sales in a competitive market. So let's ask the question, what do you need to be a successful salesperson?
Let me just start off. As we're speaking, I would say you need to be focused, you need to be targeted, you need to have tenacity, and you need to have the ability to understand that, as I mentioned in the first segment, that while sales is a numbers game, and the better you become, the more the numbers go your way in terms of the ability to convert more customers and more business. There is the requirement to keep going, and that's, I think, for anything in life. If you fall over, you've got to get up and keep going. So tenacity, the ability to keep going, and to be focused and targeted.
Well, let's kick off with being focused. Focused and targeted, that's what you said there. How do we get ourselves into a position where we're focused and targeted? Do you think sometimes that businesses, when they go out to sell, are just so unprepared, they don't truly understand the proposition that they're offering? Or is it a case that they don't understand what the customer's needs are?
Both. You put it beautifully. In the first section, Steve, as you know, I said that one of the things that needs to happen is you need to understand what it is you are attempting to sell. So you need to understand your product or service, because off the back of that, you then need to formulate, and I like number 6, don't ask me why, it's a good number. I like to formulate 6 questions that I need the answer to in order to understand whether the person that I'm talking to is actually going to be a potential customer for me. And what could those 6 questions be? Well, is this the right person I'm talking to? Are they able to make the decision?
Now, do you know what? Yes, you hear that all the time, and this is what people say. So how do you actually frame that question? How do you actually ask somebody, are you the right person? Bearing in mind that somebody that you're asking the question has got their own credibility, their own self-belief that they are the right person. How do you frame that question?
I think you have to go, let me answer that question before I go into come back a few steps, because it's all about doing your homework.
Right.
It's all about understanding where you think your product or service is going to be taken up. Where it's going to be. So it's understanding the type of customer that you think, and we call that a suspect, by the way. We suspect that they might be a type of customer. And how do you build that list? Well, you do that based on a number of parameters that you think would suit your product or service. And that could be very simply geography, size of company, the industry they're in, etc. Off the back of that, Steve, you then need to understand, well, what sort of person in that company would actually look to buy my product? Who would be responsible for buying that product? Could it be the owner? Could it be an IT director? Could it be a finance director? Who is it that I actually need to speak to? So when you're in front of somebody and you want to just qualify, and by the way, you should have done this on the phone anyway, but if you just want to qualify, if you're talking to the right person, you can ask a very simple question that is non-offensive in my opinion, and that is, how does the decision process get taken in this company? Is it just yourself, Steve? Is there a team that looks at potentially the sort of product that you're looking to engage with? How does the decision process work here?
That's a great question, great way of asking it. I tell you what, that is it. Write that down. If you learn nothing else from today's show, that is a great piece of advice, because you often read in all the sales manuals, they say, make certain you're talking to the right person. And I think there is a danger that you could end up sounding like that you're attacking the person that you're trying to make the sale from. Also, the fact that they are suspects. A lot of people think, don't they, the moment they're talking to anybody, that they aren't just prospects, but they are customers. They call them customers. Yep. And we seem to always be jumping the gun when we're going in as well, don't we?
Let me qualify what a customer is. It's somebody who's given you money. Until they've given you money, they're not a customer. Up until that point, they are just a prospect. So that's somebody that you think, having done your homework, could actually potentially buy your product or service. And why could that be? Well, because actually similar types of companies in a similar industry have done so. You've tested it somewhere else. You've actually built a suspect base of people you think. You've talked to that suspect base. Some of them have decided to have a conversation with you, and maybe somebody's bought from you. Now you have evidence that your product or service can be sold to that industry type or that type of business. So now, you're right, you're now talking to a prospect. They're only a customer when they've given you money, when they've made a purchase. So if people can just understand that, I think it changes the approach dramatically. Now, there is a bit of psychology behind that says, well, actually, if I'm going to, in the back of my mind, think that they're a customer, then everything I do, all my questions, or the way that
they'll be framed the right way.
Exactly. So there is that element. This is why sales is so complex. This is why it is a science and not just a browbeating stroke gift of the gab exercise. You know, it is a very intense role if you do it right.
In that whole area then of using linguistics and the way we frame a question, how we say a question, can we lead a prospect to be a customer by the linguistics that we use, by the way we frame a question to them? So we lead them down the garden path to the point, or lead them to water, and they eventually will drink and become a customer.
Steve, you should be doing this interview. Yes, absolutely. That's exactly right. That is exactly right. And I'm sure a lot of people are watching this thinking, well, how on earth do you do that? First of all, you have to apply yourself. You have to learn the art of selling. You have to, you start with, and I've come back to you start with 6 basic questions that you need the answer to in order to understand whether or not it's a customer. And then it builds from there. You get more intelligent. You get into things like directional questioning. What the heck is that? Well, it's the sort of thing you just mentioned. You get into assumptive selling. And there's a whole variety of different techniques that you learn on the way. So first you start with a simple model. You start with understanding what the structure of the sales meeting is about. And there's 2 ways of explaining this, and if we've got a second, I'll do so. And from that, you just build your knowledge and your skill set based on a framework, so that you get to the point where you can actually answer questions like this without doing any preparation.
Right. The 6 questions that you would ask then, what are they off the top of your head very quickly? They
change for all sorts of people. One, am I talking to the right person? So what's the process in this organisation for engagement? What's the budget? Have you put a budget aside? Is there a budget? Is there likely to be a budget created? So budget. So who makes the decision? Is there money? And this is where what is the problem that you currently have that you need solving? That in itself, Steve, is a whole trigger for a variety of different questions, because you could ask that really bluntly. You could be a very naive person, ask it very bluntly, as I've done so. But when you get more sophisticated, you start to actually deconstruct that, and you start to do exactly what you said a second ago, which is actually create a variety of different questions that seamlessly bring you to a point where the prospect is saying, well, actually, I'd like to buy your product.
Right.
So that's 3. The other questions you may choose to ask, they're the 3 critical questions, by the way. A question surrounding the future of their business. Remember, selling is all about them, it's not about you. Your business is all about your customer, not about you. So what can this product do for them? Get them to start to understand and tell you what it can do for them. So, am I talking to the right person? Is there a budget? What's it going to solve for you? What's the future, what it can do for you? How do you see this helping develop your business? Again, these are questions that get them to understand how they can use your product or service to better enhance their business.
All right, then. So that's been focused and understanding what we're going to do with those questions. What about when it comes to the tenacity of it all? I mean, you said they're focused. We know where we're going with it. What about
targets? We'll come back.
And target. Let's talk about target. Okay. That's better. Yes.
Well, it's interesting. If you are running a business, I don't care how small it is or big it is, you need to be saying to yourself, what is it that I'm going to try and do in terms of money? What am I going to actually try and turn over this year? How many orders am I going to try and get this year? I had a meeting with a client, funny enough, I know this is yesterday, on a Sunday, and they've been in business several years, 12 years now. And I said to them, so you're coming to the end of the financial year, what will you finish on? They gave me a figure. I said, what's the target next year? Well, we never set a target. I said, well, how is it you're going to target next year if you don't know what it is you're aiming to? So in sales, if you've got salespeople, they need a target. They need to understand what's expected from them. And it is as cold and as blunt as that, a financial target.
And you really got to direct your sales team to be doing that. They really do need to understand it.
Yeah.
What are we going to talk about next? So we've talked there about focus. We've talked about targets. Targets are really important. We've talked too about the 6 questions that are imperative so that we know where our foundations are, our starting point. We're going to be talking about tenacity. What else are we going to be looking at? What are the other key elements we're going to be talking about in the next segments?
Enhancing your skill. How do I become better at doing what I'm doing? How do I become a better salesperson? What is it I need to learn?
Antonio Falco. Now, one of the things you do need to learn are just some of the different skills that are out there to be more effective at sales. And one of those skills is the power of the telephone. We had a lot of reaction just recently when Anthony Steers, the telephone assassin, joined me here on the program. So what are the key skills for you to be a killer salesman on the phone?
I'm Anthony Steers, also known as the telephone assassin, and I try and encourage people not to hide behind their emails and social media and just make conversations to move things forwards. The thing I'm really hoping most people have picked up on is that manners and etiquette is one of the best tools that you can have on the phone. And if you take that respectful approach of just dropping off a pizza menu when prospecting and making it feel like you're not trying to take an order, just get on their radar, you'll find that people are very receptive. And if you can follow the 3 phases, which are spend the time to build rapport with people, so do some research first and be very respectful of them and their time. Then establish your credibility by looking at case studies and testimonials that you've got that you can share with them that they can relate to. And then finally, make sure you've designed a test drive that creates urgency and gives them a reason to be able to move forwards and for you to demonstrate your value. So as I mentioned earlier on, fingers crossed you're actually feeling pretty reassured you're doing a lot of this already. But if you can get 1 or 2 little gems that make a difference, then hopefully I'll give everybody the confidence to pick up the phone and the skills to make every call count.
Anthony Steers, the telephone assassin on Business Connections Live, and a great show there as well. So if you're looking for advice on how to be more effective when it comes to picking up the phone, do watch the entire program from Anthony. Now, my guest on today's show is Antonio Falco. He is the sales director, and we're looking at how we can increase sales in a competitive market. How do you become a better salesperson? And how important is resilience?
I think you have to have the resilience to keep going. You know, Steve, nothing easy in life is free. Nothing easy or worthwhile in life is easy to get to. You know that. You're running a business and you have to keep going. Yes, you can change your tack and you can change maybe some of the ideas you have and how you promote the business, but fundamentally, when it comes to sales, you have to have tenacity to keep going. You have to understand that, as you said in an earlier section, that you're going to get some knockbacks. And as I said, that's okay because you're only after 1 or 2 answers, yes or no, ultimately, and either of those have equal value. So it's the ability to keep picking yourself up and going, because you never know what's around the corner. You know, you never know that you might come into a very nice purple patch where every single person you speak to wants to buy your product, and sometimes it goes that way. But it only goes that way if you keep focused, you keep working, and you're tenacious about doing it.
It's the danger with UK businesses and businesses in general that we've often heard the expression no pay, no pay, no pay, no pay. And just before they break that cycle, just before things are starting to look up, they've done all the hard work, but that's when they give up. They give up in that part of the cycle. And if they were to keep going just a little bit longer, they would turn that circle into the purple patch. But a lot of businesses seem to give up because they think, I've tried everything, it's just not working.
Well, I think, Steve, that there's a few things to say about that. One is, in that process where nothing is happening, you need to analyse why nothing's happening. Is it my approach? Is it my inability to understand how to elicit whether or not I'm talking to a potential customer? Have I got the skills to do that? Do I need some help with that? Is it that my product or service actually has no room? There is no market for it. It's just in my own mind it's got a market. So you have to really try and understand that as well whilst you're going through that process. So this isn't just about keep going and something will happen. There is an element of that, but you have to just ensure that what you're trying to offer genuinely has a potential marketplace.
When we are trying to offer something to our customer, do we sometimes get the technique wrong? You do hear a lot of times, and you see this on some of the shopping channels, in fact, where people are trying to sell features. They're not trying to sell benefits. Or is this whole features and benefits thing, is that just a whole area where people get completely confused?
I think that's absolutely right. And you've moved me very swiftly onto and elegantly onto my favourite topic, because this whole features and benefits thing, I think there's a massive amount of confusion. And this comes to what I was saying earlier on about the ability to actually get better at your job. You know, in order to understand and get to grips with selling, you really have to understand the intricacies of it. And a lot of people do not understand the difference between features and benefits, or they think they're selling benefits. The reality is, Steve, I've said on this show before, that the vast majority, and I'm talking business to business sales, not business to consumer sales, is business to business selling. People think that they have a bunch of benefits that somebody's going to like. And so, as I put in my new book, Stop Pitching and Start Selling, what they do is they hope to say enough of the right things that somebody might go, oh, that sounds interesting, I'd buy your product. That isn't selling. That's just what I call verbally regurgitating whatever you can remember onto somebody in the hope that something might stick. That's not selling. So that's this pitching phenomenon that's happened over the past couple of years, which really demonstrates why you need to understand selling. And so this features and benefits scenario, the reality is that all you actually have is a bunch of features that might actually be of benefit to somebody. Your job is to understand which of your features actually are of benefit to that potential customer. And they could be different from customer to customer, or potential customer to potential customer. So this comes down to understanding your product or service, understanding what you need to ask in order to elicit whether or not you're talking to a potential customer. And so there is an enormous amount of intelligence behind the ability to sell. And I'm going to disagree on one thing you said earlier on. I don't think that there is such a thing as born salespeople, just as there isn't such a thing as born brain surgeons. Everything has to be learnt. There might be a bent towards it. There might be a characterization towards being a salesperson, but that person still needs to learn the art of it. They still need to learn the mechanics. They still need to learn the engineering that goes behind selling. And features and benefits is one of those wonderful things that demonstrates exactly whether or not you know your stuff or not.
So is that the inexperienced salesperson then that is sprouting off and just giving features, giving benefits, and not really understanding the impact that they have on their potential customer, on their prospect?
Exactly that. Exactly that. Because what are you trying to do? As I said earlier on, you are trying to actually find out what the problem is. By asking questions, you are attempting to find out what exactly is the problem that this potential customer has got. And then you're going to pick out of your features the thing that will fix that problem. And that gets turned into a benefit, because it's a benefit to them. It's the old saying, Steve, one man's meat is another man's poison. It's no different in selling. One man's feature, or one company's feature, is somebody else's benefit, and vice versa. So this is what I'm talking about, the art of selling, the skill of selling, understanding what you're doing. You have to understand that you have no benefits. All you've got is a bunch of features. Your skill is to understand which of your features is going to suit that particular customer.
Well, there we go. There's the clarity that perhaps you possibly need now when it comes to features and benefits, and what you should be doing with those tools that you have when you've got them in the palm of your hands. How best do you present those to your prospect, who hopefully will turn into a customer? And it's not just the buckshot effect. It is actually by understanding the needs of the customer, so that you can actually tell them what the benefits will be, because you understand their needs.
Exactly.
Where do we go after that then? Because, I mean, that's really interesting. What's the next stage, the next part of the process?
Well, one of the final part, ask for the order. Exactly what you said earlier on.
So people are frightened of doing that, aren't they?
People are frightened of doing that. And there's two ways that you can handle this. And with experience, knowledge and ability, you start to change the way that you get to the point where you make that final exchange. And yes, there is the old saying, always be closing. As you become better at the art of selling...
ABC.
As you become better at the art of selling, and you start to intimately understand the engineering, the mechanics behind selling, and what exactly you're doing, and all the stuff you mentioned before about questioning and all that kind of stuff, you can do that from the very, very beginning, from the word off. But for most inexperienced people, they have to understand that there's a bit of a process. And yes, don't get sophisticated about it. Ask questions. Show them that you understand the problem. Here's my solution. Then ask for the order.
When you're out and you're doing training and you're talking to people about doing this, do you see people going, Is this very much a case of you say this is how it should be done, people go, yep, that's how it should be done, but there's something, there is a real issue, a personality issue, that it is very difficult to do that. When you're looking in the whites of your customer's eye, to ask for the order sometimes, some people will find very difficult. Is that because they haven't prepped enough, because they haven't prepared enough, they haven't understood the benefits to them, to their client enough? Is it because they're unprepared that they don't feel confident enough to ask for the order?
Well, there's the word, confidence. Being prepared gives you confidence. So it's the confidence that knowing that you've done the right job. And you know, as other sales professionals watching this will understand, and actually when you go through that very basic process, which actually is a very complicated process, but when you go through that basic structure, what you're really doing is you're getting the customer to engage with you, or the potential customer to engage with you, to engage with you during that discussion process. And that part of that engagement is them saying to you, yeah, that makes sense, no, that doesn't make sense. Well, that gives you a clue that you need to find out something else. That gives you a clue that you need to use a different tack. And that, you know, is something that's brought over through experience and ability, and ability is a big thing. Because there's a lot of experienced salespeople out there that, frankly, in my opinion, might have 25 years experience, but the reality they've got 1 year's experience 25 times over. And so it is ability that counts, and having done it a number of times. So it is about bringing that potential prospect with you through that conversation. You know, and the old thing of listening twice as much as you talk is a foundation of
I was going to ask you, we're given 2 ears and 1 mouth, we should use them in that ratio. Do you think we listen enough in the sales environment as a salesperson?
Look, when I see a number of my clients, small businesses, and their job is to run the business, deliver the product, manage a team of people, and actually be the salesperson as well, that skill of selling is lacking. And so what happens is they walk in and they verbally regurgitate everything about themselves and their business and they do this pitching. So frustrating. They do this pitching.
You're like a dog with a bone with the pitching, don't you?
I hate it because actually what it does is it denigrates the profession of selling, because pitching is not selling. And they pitch, and that's what they think selling is about. And then they hang their hopes on the fact that they've said enough of the right things that somebody's going to, that sounds fantastic, great. So yes, it's confidence, it's being prepared, it's understanding your business, it's knowing what to ask. And then at the end of the day, it's saying, can we please have your business? Because this...
Briefly, with the pitching, do you think that is because of programs like The Apprentice and things like that we've now got into this psyche? Very briefly, is that because of the likes of The Apprentice, do you feel?
It doesn't help.
My guest on today's show is Antonio Falco. More from him in just a few moments' time. So you're thinking to yourself, yes, I'd like to be an expert on Business Connections Live. All you need to do is go to our website at businessconnectionslive.com and you'll find out more about how you can be a business show expert guest. It explains everything you need to know to prepare to come on the program. And don't forget, if you want to raise your profile, if you're a speaker, if you're a business owner, or you just want to be recognized by your industry peers, this is a great way of doing that. The page will explain everything you need to know. It'll also take you to a page where you can fill in the appropriate details so that you can become an expert on the program. Just simply go to businessconnectionslive.com and then follow the link to being an expert guest on the show. And who knows, we could be talking to you in the very near future here on Business Connections Live. Now, my guest on today's show is Antonio Falco. He's an expert in his field. We're looking at sales today. He calls himself the Sales Director. And today we're talking about how you can increase sales in a competitive market. Now, what do people get wrong when they're pitching? Here's more from Antonio.
My interpretation of those, Steve, are whenever I see somebody pitching, it is what I said earlier on. It's regurgitating as much of the features of your product or service that you have to offer, in the hope that some of it will stick and your potential customer, your prospect, will say, I like the sound of that, and may ask you more questions about it. And then so it's this regurgitation of everything you can think of with hope attached off the back of it. Whereas selling is a controlled process. It's an intelligent process, because what is it you're actually doing? What is it you're actually selling at the end of the day? In my belief, Steve, I think what you're selling is confidence. You're selling the fact that your product or service will actually do what you say it's going to do. Because up until a customer actually buys your product or service and uses it, they really don't know. I know all the case studies and testimonials in the world just offer some comfort, but they really don't know till they start using you or your product or your service. So what you're actually selling is confidence. But I don't think you build confidence up without understanding what their problem is, without demonstrating you have a solution, without digging deep and understanding exactly how is your product or service going to fix their problem. What is it exactly going to do for you? And so in this whole process of structured selling, and which to a lot of sales professionals doesn't look like it's structured, a bit like any sport, as we discussed earlier on, it doesn't look like there's much effort going in. That's the top tier of selling. You have to dig deep into understanding what is that you're going to solve for that particular client.
Do you think the mistake is sometimes made when people are pitching and selling, when they are pitching, that they feel that demonstrating is selling?
I think that, let me clarify pitching and presenting then, because I think that's where you might be going. I think there's a difference between pitching and presenting. When you are presenting something, and in that sales meeting where part of that cycle is your opportunity to actually take in what you've heard, reincorporate it into what you do, and then coming back with a solution, having understood what the problem is, that's when you're presenting a solution. And so there are opportunities where you have to do a presentation from what appears to be cold and might be interpreted as pitching, but actually the clever presenter has done some homework beforehand. And so they're presenting based with some knowledge. Pitching is presenting with no knowledge. It is that hope of, if I say enough of the right things, they're going to like what I have to say. So presenting means you've done some homework. Selling means you've understood the problem. Pitching is just hoping.
I think we can pretty much say that he's not a big fan of pitching. If you are one of those salesmen that are pitching at the moment, perhaps maybe you should be maybe looking at your technique and your skills, your skill set that you have at the moment. A lot of people seem to go wrong. That we've gone through the process. We've done our professional sales. We've worked our way through our sales. We've asked for the order at the end. You do find that a lot of salespeople at that point seem to wash their hands of the prospect. The moment that the prospect becomes a customer, they seem to wash their hands and they feel that now everything is running fine, no real need to work with that customer again. Well, not as hard as they have done up until that point.
So you're talking about the one-off sale where there's nothing coming after it. Thanks for the order. I'm hightailing it out of here.
I've got the money. Thank you very much. I'm out of here. Well, they don't see the value in that customer being an ongoing customer.
Well, I think this comes down to the company and the philosophy and the way that you structure your sales team. I think it's a matter of personal pride. As a matter of, I remember in my past career in companies, yes, my job was actually done when the order was placed. But out of personal pride, professionalism, care, due and attention, whatever label you want to put on it, Steve, I always wanted to make sure that when the product or service was delivered, when they were working with it or up and running, I always used to put a call in to say, "Hi, Steve, it's Antonio. I know you're dealing with the technical guys now. I just wanted to ring in and make sure that you were happy, and what I said was going to happen is happening. What I said you were going to buy is what you bought." But that's just professional pride. There are a lot of companies that once the salesperson's done their job, it moves on to a different set of people. It moves on to an account manager or the technical team or whoever it is that's delivering the product or service.
But for small companies, what would be your suggestion to them if there's a small follow-up? And how often should you be talking to a new customer? Is it something that you talk a lot to them? Do you follow up a lot after they've got the initial product? Is it very much down to the product that you were selling or the service you were selling, or is that whole art of communication, is it still very important in the post-sales environment?
For me, it's critical, and I always suggest that people do, if you're running a small business, you do follow up after that sale has been made. Because what is it you want? You're actually after a recommendation. Isn't it great to get a testimonial and a case study from all your customers? And
ask for a recommendation.
Yeah.
Indeed. I mean, a lot of people don't do that, do they?
Do you know, the smart business person, the smart salesperson, what do they ask for? After the deal is done, they go back and go, now what I'd like, and my subsequent targets, unbeknownst to you, the customer, is I'd love a case study or a testimonial and some introductions, some referrals.
It's interesting because after every one of our programmes, we always ask for all our guests to give a testimonial for the programme. And we always ask for that. And the reason we do that is because people will not buy necessarily, but that's what they're looking for. That testimonial gives them a feeling of comfort to a certain extent, doesn't it?
And value. The fact that they're worth something, you know, and because what are you trying to do with the business? You're trying to build a long-term reputation. You know, to run a business successfully takes years. There's no overnight success. Not really. I mean, who'd heard of Microsoft in the first 10 years of their life, or IBM, or any of those big companies? Nobody'd really heard of them. You know, it takes years to actually establish yourself. And to make that establishment stick, to make your reputation stick, I think you have to do a lot of follow-up. I think you have to do a lot of customer care afterwards.
Do you know, we've touched very briefly on it there, and maybe what we'll do is that over the next few minutes, what we'll do, we'll just talk a little bit, we have to split this in half, getting customers, because that must be one of the biggest problems. And we're talking about recommendations there. Is there a process for finding prospects? We've talked about the prospect that we've already got. How do you find them? At the very beginning of the programme, we talked about yellow pages. People don't seem to use yellow pages anymore. What is the route to prospect for new clients?
Well, we're lucky now, because now there's a variety of different routes. You've now got online networking, so you've got the likes of LinkedIn, you've got other social media, Facebook, where people can find out about you and try and engage with you, and you can engage with admittedly, it's one removed from a face or telephone conversation, but it's an engagement process. You've got other elements of social media that allow you to start to engage with potential customers. You've got networking events where you can actually face-to-face meet and talk to people, and you can hopefully find an opportunity there. And how do you do that? Well, you ask questions. It's all about them. It's not about you. You know, the network bore is the one that talks about themselves instead of talks about you. So
cocktail eyes.
Heck yeah, there you go.
You're not very interesting. Who's over there? Who can I talk to over there? Isn't it? Yes.
So there's that. There's always room, in my opinion, for direct, cold. You've never heard of me, I've never heard of you, but I think you could be a potential customer of mine, that suspect, of attempting to engage with clients direct from cold.
You're talking about cold calling, aren't you? And I can feel it right now. There are people watching this, and there is a shiver going down their back as we're talking about it.
Well, you know, Steve, you go to a networking event and you end up talking to 3 or 4 people, and a couple of them you think to yourself, gosh, that could be a potential customer. What happens then? Most people do nothing with it. Well, what has to happen? You go back to your desk and you give them a call. Okay, it might be slightly warm because you can very quickly in the first sentence say, hi, I met you at XYZ networking event, but you still then have to give them a reason why they need to sit down and talk to you. So, and how many times have you seen Dragon's Den? You mentioned Dragon's Den earlier on. How many times have you seen Dragon's Den where one of the dragons has said, so how many people have you actually called? No one. So you want me to make the call for you?
And that's why they're there, isn't it? Because they're trying to make the call. Listen, we're going to talk more about social media, how it works, how to maximise networking. Got a lot to get through still, and maybe just a little bit about cold calling as well on this edition of Business Connections Live. That's all to come in the next 12 minutes or so right here on the programme. We hope you're enjoying the programme. Don't forget, you can always contact us by simply going to our email address. You can send us an email if you are or you have questions about the programme, then studio at Business Connections Live. More from Antonio Falco in just a few moments' time. Just a quick reminder though, right now here on the program about some of our future guests. They're going to be including the likes of Steve Mills, the prudent marketeer, Brad Burton and Gary Turner. We talked about Gary Turner earlier on from Zero. He's going to be on the program with Brad in a couple of weeks. We're going to be talking about the business networking show as well. And the welcome returner, Steve Nichols as well, talking about all things tech. Also, would you like to sponsor the program? Are you enjoying the show today? You can sponsor the show if you want. The show, incidentally, is going to be shown on local television. If you go to Freeview Channel 8 in the Cambridge area, and also on the local Virgin service in the Cambridge area, you can watch the programme there as well. A great opportunity, and we're hoping to expand that service right across the UK over the coming months. So a real opportunity. If you'd like to sponsor the show, then please do get in touch with us. Once again, you can email us at studio@businessconnectionslive.com. You can always have a chat with us on the Dog and Bone. We'll do it old style, 01784 256 777. And don't forget, you can always follow us too on our Twitter feed, which is at BCL Business TV. That's all the ways you can get in touch with it. Looking forward to the programs, in fact. So if you'd like to be a guest as well on the show, do get in touch with us by those different means. Okay, let's move smartly on. We're into our last segment of the programme. You are watching Business Connections Live. My guest on today's show is Antonio Falco. We're talking about how to make sales work. Antonio, professional with years of expertise on how businesses can open the door to untapped sales. We've talked about the processes. We've just been talking there a little bit about how to cold call or how to get new prospects. Cold calling, just got to get on and do it, haven't you?
You know, Steve, I remember talking to a bank manager quite a few years ago, and he said, I've just been to see one of my customers, and he's complained to me about the fact that there's no business coming through the door. And he said to him, well, what's that on your desk? Pick the thing up and ring somebody.
What was on his desk then?
Telephone.
just checking. But I was going to be there.
Telephone. Look, it's interesting you mentioned Cambridge. I've got clients in Cambridge. I deal with an awful lot of technology companies. You said something very early on, which I'm going to humbly disagree with, which is, if you've got an object, you can pitch for an object. On a business consumer, I agree with you, but you know what? If you've got a piece of technology that's £300,000, you can't pitch for that. You've got to understand what that piece of technology is actually going to solve for that client, and that does require a professional sales approach. So, it's in the technology field, you really have to get to grips with this whole cycle of understanding what your piece of technology can actually fix for a client. I mean, I deal with a number of IT services companies. All very, very similar. They're looking for clients that, in order to manage their IT facilities on their behalf as the third parties. Lots of these companies around. I'm sure a lot of the viewers have got are an IT services company. Why on earth would it be that a customer would now want to use your IT services company as opposed to somebody else? There's only, one reason they'd want to do it is because you found a really good reason for them to do so. And why have you done that? Because you've understood what their problem is. You've understood what their business is about. You've demonstrated that you have a clear understanding of the issues that they come across and that your business is set up to help them.
I suppose what you're saying is that a lot of people who are in business that are already getting a service from somebody else are just okay about it. And there's always an opportunity to go in there with something that is a bit better than okay.
Exactly that. But even if it is better than okay, Steve, you've still got to do the work that says, how am I going to determine whether or not my product or service is going to they're going to buy my product or service? How am I going to determine that there's going to be the right fit? And you've got to do that by understanding the art of selling. So coming back to cold calling, Steve, I'm just a fan of the fact that the only thing you ever have any control over is the amount of people you speak to. Networking, social media, and I've got a chapter on it in my new book, Social Media. It's all fantastic, but don't use it as a crutch to avoid doing the hard-nosed stuff, which is talking to people. A lot of businesses do get business through social media. What they really get is they get the opportunity to have that to make a pitch. That's what they really get. But you still have to understand the art of selling. But fundamentally, the social media opens up avenues to touch and other potential customers with your product or service, but it still comes down to the fact that you have to engage in discussion to understand how you can fix their problem if they've got one. And that's the key. So social media is great. Don't use it as a crutch. Don't wait for it to come in. You can be waiting an awful long time for the phone to ring. Make the phone ring by picking it up and dialing something.
Listen, I hope you found today a useful exercise. Going to be asking Antonio in just a moment to give us his thoughts, a download in 3 minutes about the whole world of sales, not the pitch, but the sell. Before we do that, though, the new book is coming out. You've been alluding to it all the way through the show. We hate that. So tell us about the book.
So many people ask me to write a book, so I'm just writing the very first one, which is called Stop Pitching and Start Selling. It's a very small introductory book into selling. It really sets the mindset in terms of what is it that I should be, kind of things we've been discussing today. What should I be thinking about and focusing on? And
does it take you through the entire process from looking for prospects, or is it from prospect to selling? And the techniques in selling, is it all of that?
It does a little bit of that. It sets the scene. It gets people into the mindset that actually me going out and regurgitating all the wonderful things about my business isn't actually the way to do it. So it's an introductory book, Steve, that just sets out the mindset about how you need to change from doing that to actually get into grips with selling your product or service, not just pitching it.
And that book's going to be available the latter part of 2015?
Yes, well, I'm hoping to launch it. My target is to launch it at the We Mean Business in Working on the 7th of October. I'm one of the speakers there. I think you're going to be there as well. So that's when I'm hoping to launch it. That's the target date.
All right then, that's fantastic. Now, as always, we invite our guests to look straight down the camera lens and to give us a bit of an insight, the real takeaways from this particular show. Do hope you enjoyed it. I mean, sales is a tricky path to sale. You know what I mean? But it is a difficult area. If you are in sales, you'll know that. There are some people who are very blasé about it. They go out there and it's something they do naturally. Antonio has disagreed with me, I think, 3 times on today's show. I do think that some people, it comes from nature, not nurture. There are people that I have known who just naturally go down the route of being naturally salesy in the way that their linguistic qualities are. Obviously, from cold, they're not going to be great salespeople, but with a little bit of training, they become great salespeople. And there are some people who have no skill at all, but with the right training also become great salespeople. So I think everybody can do it. Just needs to be a little bit of bravery, a little bit of courage to go out there, maybe to pick up the phone, make that cold call, and to understand the process that you are going through as a salesperson, as a sales professional. Listen, I'm not going to steal your thunder. The airwaves of yours. Straight down camera number 1. Say who you are, where you're from, and the takeaways that we should get from today's programme. Antonio.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much for listening and watching today. Just a couple of key things to take away with you. 1, set yourself a target. Understand what it is you're aiming towards. Without that, you're going to be having a scattergun approach. 2, understand what you're selling. Now, you think you know what you're selling, but actually sit down and think about it and write down 6 questions that you think you need the answer to before you can understand whether you're talking to a prospective customer or not. 6 questions. It takes some thought. Sit down and do it. 3rd, when you're in front of a potential customer, understand what their problem is. Selling is about them, not about you. And the 4th thing, ask for the order. Because when you ask for the order, it very quickly clarifies whether or not you've done the job right, whether or not you've understood their problem, and whether or not you're really talking to a potential customer. Because strange things happen when you ask for money, and that's what you're doing when you ask for an order. Do that, read some sales books, read mine, and just get to grips with the art of selling.
And it really is as straightforward and as simple as that when it comes to selling. If you want to, just before you do go, I mean, we talked a little bit about networking, and just very briefly, we've got a few minutes left at the moment. Do you think people get networking very wrong when they're out there?
Yes, and I think that the reason they get it wrong is because nobody's shown them how to do it. I think there's some basic rules about networking. 1 is set yourself a target for how many people you want to talk to. 2, make sure that when you come away from networking, you follow those people up, even with just an email saying, hi, it's great to meet you.
And a lot of people don't, do they?
Do that.
They'll go to the networking event, they'll have a glass of wine, they'll stand and talk for hours
To the same person.
and then do nothing, though, with the contacts.
Absolutely right.
I mean, for instance, when you go to a networking event, do you say, right, I will make 3 key contacts or 4 key contacts that I will follow up and make an appointment with?
That's exactly what I do. Exactly what I do. Because you know what?
Give yourself an objective.
Absolutely right. Without setting yourself an objective, a target, what is it you're actually doing there? You know, we want to make sure that we're not selling at networking. Absolutely right. The only thing you're trying to do there is to meet people, maybe get some advice. Networking is a great place to get some advice, but also to meet a potential customer. And you do that by asking questions. What is it you do, Steve? How's business? What are you hoping to do next year? What's your, how do people like your product? How do you go about selling it? Ask questions that are relevant to those people, and then yes, come away and follow up.
And is there a time restraint, do you think, that because there's nothing worse than the person standing in the corner who is not engaging with the room, and you do find yourself gravitating towards them, and then all of a sudden you are in a deep conversation. You've got to remember that this isn't about going out for a chat, is it?
No. What's the phrase out of Jerry Maguire? This is not show friends, this is show business. That's it, and that's what you are there, and everybody's there, quite honestly. And what's wrong with it anyway? These groups are set up so that potential people can meet potential customers, and so that's what you're there to do. And so there's nothing wrong with moving around, working the room, moving around the room, and you do that by setting yourself an objective, by finding out why people are there, by finding out about them, and then following up afterwards. And so yes, you do sometimes get caught in the corner with somebody, and you have to politely say, it's been lovely to speak to you, I'm just going to go meet some other people, we'll catch up soon, thank you.
And do you think there are different expectations of what you can actually get out of networking, in as much as do not be expecting that you're going to get a sell out of the evening or whatever? You may get an appointment, but really you may get a recommendation, and that is just as important.
Just as vital, absolutely right. And again, this is about setting your expectations for that evening. And you know what, there's also nothing wrong with actually going along to an event and saying, you know what, today I'm actually going to help as many people as I can. So I'm going to actually ask people, if they've got a question, I'm going to answer it for you. So become a font of knowledge. That's also a great way of actually developing your brand. Somebody that's actually a font of knowledge that helps people out. And you know what, from that, something will flow as a result of that. So there's lots of different things you can set yourself as an objective when you go to a networking event. But the key is work the room, set an objective, follow up when you get back.
Antonio Falco on this week's edition of Business Connections Live. And don't forget, you can go to his website and find out more about Antonio and the services that he offers to businesses just like yours. And really, you've got 2 shows for the price of one there, a bit on networking and also on sales technique and how to grow your sales revenue by just a few positive actions with your sales team. Don't forget, if you'd like to come on the program, do get in touch with us here at Business Connections Live. Some of the expert guests that we've got lined up for you in the near future. We've got Susan Armstrong. She's a speaker and author. She talks on leadership. She's going to be coming on the program in the near future. Penny Haslam, she's been on before as well. Award-winning inspirational speaker, some great ideas, and she's going to be back on the show. And I saw this guy a couple of weeks ago, Warren Knight. He's a professional speaker on digital technology and digital marketing. He's got a brand new book coming out very shortly. He's going to just give you some great advice on how to grow your business using social media and just some of the tools that are out there for you to get more out of your website and to optimize it better. That's all coming up on future editions of Business Connections Live. But from all the team here at Business Connections Live, thank you very much for watching today's program. We're back again very shortly. Till the next time, then, it's bye for now. Bye-bye.